drawing a bright line. Iowa 5th District Congressman Steve King isn't shy about his generally conservative political views. We'll explore those perspectives in a conversation with Congressman King on this edition of Iowa Press.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation, the Iowa Bankers Association for personal, business, and commercial needs. Iowa banks help Iowans reach their financial goals. And by the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
By Iowa's private colleges and universities, enrolling 25% of the total Iowa higher education enrollment and conferring 44% of the baccalaureate and 40% of the graduate degrees in the state. More information is available at www.thinkindependently.com.
The Iowa Hospital Association, supporting the missions and visions of Iowa's 117 community hospitals. The Iowa Hospital Association. We care about Iowa's health.
On statewide Iowa Public Television, this is the Friday, April 24th edition of Iowa Press. Here is Dean Borg.
There's no denying that the political spotlight is on the Democrats in these early months of the Obama administration and the Democratic majorities in Congress, but that doesn't mean conservative views aren't being voiced, and in some cases prominently voiced. Among those most prominent in those conservative voices is Iowa's 5th District Congressman Steve King. And the role isn't new for him. He was getting the same attention when Republicans held the White House and congressional majorities and when he served in the Iowa legislature. Backed by the heavily Republican Western Iowa 5th District, Steve King is now in the early months of a 4th term in the House of Representatives. Welcome back to Iowa Press.
Thanks a lot, Dean. I appreciate being here again.
Nice to have you. And across the table, Associated Press senior political writer Mike Glover and James Lynch, political writer for the Gazette, published in Cedar Rapids.
Congressman, let's start with the edge of the news if we could. Probably the biggest news event of the past several years happened in the state this month. The Supreme Court legalized gay marriage. I think I know where you are on that issue. What should conservatives like you do about that ruling?
Well, we look at the ruling, and I think it's an outrageous decision. It's judge-made law, and I have read through that case thoroughly. It's set a precedent. I think that case turned on something that was a large misconception when they argued that the same-sex couples are similarly situated with opposite-sex couples. They are not, and the whole case flows from that. But the people in this state are going to have to rise up and amend the Constitution if they're to preserve marriage between a man and a woman. The legislature is still seated as we speak. They have a few alternatives, not many, and the clock is ticking down by the hour. So and the bottom line is a constitutional amendment, and I believe that this legislature might be able to yet in these waning hours pass a residency requirement which would shut off 95% of the same-sex marriages that will take place in this state. And we already see that there is a tour that's lined up to come in from Missouri.
Right.
Those folks would go back home to a state that has an amendment that prohibits same-sex marriage, and the litigation would start there and many other states.
And as Dean mentioned, you are considered a leader of the conservative movement in this state. What is your role in whatever happens after this decision? What do you plan to do? And how does it affect your plans?
Well, I'll continue to work on this issue. I brought the pro-family groups together right after this decision, which was August 30th of 2007 by the District Court Judge Robert B. Hansen. Pulled them together and we started an effort. That effort wasn't big enough or broad enough or strong enough to get us to the point where we need to be today. I'll continue to do that. I'll bring national leaders in, and I have been engaged in that over the last 3 weeks, bringing a national voice to this. We've got to build a coalition that is in it for the long haul. And by the way, the people in this state and across the country that think that they should turn their efforts against someone within the pro-family group need to understand that that drains energy away. We've got to come together like a family if we're going to defend the families in the state and really go and line up against the efforts that have been undermining families.
Are you saying there are divisions within the conservative movement on this issue?
There are always divisions in politics. politics, and it just happens that way. And there are divisions within the Democrat caucus in the Iowa House and the Iowa Senate, and there are separations that exist between the state House and the state Senate among Republicans as well. This is so important. We've got to put aside anything that might look like a difference, pool our resources, and work together like a team.
Congressman, you've been going around the state talking about running for governor. How does this affect those plans? Will this be the issue that gets you into the race? You're polling in eastern Iowa on this issue. Is this the deciding factor?
You know, honestly, I've never brought the subject up about running for governor, but I have answered a lot of questions. And I answered a question that was on, I believe it was April 3rd, the day that this Supreme Court decision came out. And the question was directly, does this make it more likely that you run for governor? The answer is just an analytical answer, yes, by degree. But the question then becomes, how much of a degree? And I will just say that has unfolded in the last 3 weeks makes me neither more nor less likely to run for governor. I want to see this legislature get to adjournment and then assess all of the things we need to do. But policy is more important than anything that I might want to do personally. And in fact, I've long ago been satisfied with my personal ambitions.
What are you doing, though, to make the decision? Are you raising money? Are you talking to people about whether or not they're looking for you to be the candidate? Are you doing more polling?
We haven't done any polling in the state. I do have some messages from other polling out there about name ID that actually informs this a little bit. I have been active for the last 4 or more years raising money across the state to have a broader footprint. And I'm finding that there are a lot of people in eastern Iowa that are paying attention to what actually is going on out of the 5th District of Iowa. But I don't go to bed at night thinking about it, nor getting up in the morning thinking about it. I have got a lot of work ahead of me. I enjoy it all, and I appreciate the challenges that I've had the privilege to meet as an elected member of Congress and as an Iowa senator in the past.
What is the purpose then for you of the telephone calls that are being made in the 2nd Congressional District mentioning your name, and it is a poll?
Well, I'm wanting to mobilize Iowans. And I'm wanting to work with the National Organization for Marriage and every other pro-family group that will bring this together. Part of it is bringing resources together, part is mobilizing people. And my voice is a voice that's recognized across the state as a pro-family conservative leader, and so that's just part of teamwork that's going on across the state. I couldn't hardly confine that just to the 5th District. Most of them know what I think out there, and they are, you mentioned earlier, a strong Republican district. I think that actually it is about an average Republican district as far as congressional districts in America are concerned.
Senator Grassley is going to be running for re-election here now, and on the same ticket as, not on the same ticket, but on the same ballot, the same election as Governor Culver. How much of an advantage does that give Republicans in having Grassley at the top of the Republican ticket?
Well, I'd have to think it helps. I mean, Senator Grassley is the most popular politician in the history of the state of Iowa by the measure I would have, which is memory and what little history I've read about the previous people. And Republicans broadly support Chuck Grassley. He doesn't have very many enemies in the political world. He has support across the aisle, so I would think that leading the ticket would be helpful and for a Republican that might be a nominee for governor.
Have you been satisfied with Senator Grassley and the way that he's reacted to the same-sex marriage decision in Iowa?
I think that Senator Grassley answered the first questions from the status of he'd like to take a look and understand the alternatives that are there before he'd speak too directly on it. I don't have any doubt about where Senator Grassley stands on marriage or where his faith is or where his convictions are. Iowans shouldn't either. And often we're being parsed for a phrase that comes out of our mouths as if that's the one thing that reflects our philosophy. That's incorrect. I put a lot of words into the congressional record, and I think people should read it. Chuck Grassley puts a lot of words into the congressional record. He has a broad understanding, and he's a good supporter of families.
I'd like you to step back and take a look at the Republican Party in the state. There are those who suggest the Republican Party in the state faces some challenges. Democrats have about 111,000 more registered voters than you do. They've even succeeded until this quarter with raising more money than you. They have both chambers of the legislature and they have the governor's office. What's your take on the health of the Republican Party in the state?
A year and a half or 2 years ago, it was pretty weak. And I think it showed up in the elections last fall, but it's not something that's unique to Iowa. Across the country, you'll see a lot of these same trends. What I'm seeing is that For example, when the Republicans stood together and voted against the stimulus bill, 178 no, that was a rejection of President Obama's economic policy that was universal in our conference. That put a spring in the step of congressional Republicans, and I think that there's an extra spring in the step of Republicans in this state too. They're starting to see what happens if you elect a President Obama and you take a lurch to the left on many things. They're starting to see what happens when you have Democrat majorities in the Iowa House and Senate and a Democrat governor who said one thing and then takes an opposite position on marriage just a little over a year later. That is mobilizing. I'm having young people come to me saying, I really want to raise my family first. Now I'm ready to engage in public service and public policy. You'll see a lot more energy out of Republicans into the 2010 election than we saw in 2008.
And what's your role in whatever needs to be done to make the Republican Party healthier? What do you plan to do?
Well, I look to the chairman, Matt Strawn, and I think we have an outstanding chairman of the Republican Party. His work in coordination with the elected leaders in the Iowa House and the Iowa Senate, that being Craig Paulson and Paul McKinley, they're both doing a great job there. They have really slowed down a lot of the Democratic juggernaut that might have steamrolled over this state. And I am working with them. I'm working with candidates for the state House and the state Senate, and also working to recruit candidates to run in the congressional seats so that we get a bigger and better team out into the field. And I will say this, I anticipate that we will pick up seats in November of 2010. And I think any political analysis will agree with that. The question is, will it be enough to win a majority?
And that's in the state legislature, in Congress?
It's in the state and in Congress. I will say in the state House, I anticipate we will pick up seats. I think we'll pick up seats in the state Senate, and we'll pick up seats in the United States House of Representatives, and I expect that will also happen in the Senate. I'll make that prediction here and come back and challenge me if I'm wrong, but that'll be the historical trend, and we have the energy now to pick this thing up and bring the right candidates forward and follow through.
Is that based on what has already happened or what you anticipate is going to happen between now and November 2010?
Dean, a lot of it is on what's already happened. It's the candidates that come to me. It's the candidates that I meet that are flowing through our conference that come out to Washington to get to know us. It's the people on the ground here in the state that are presenting themselves as candidates. There's a lot of interest, and the conservative movement is not going to take a pass on this. They don't want to check out of this contest. And I say this to them, that people get the government that they earn. It's hard work. We're going to have to raise money. We've got to have good candidates, but we'll have the government that we earn. Republicans haven't earned it well enough in the last few elections. We need to do that in 2010.
Bruce Braley, Dave Loebsack, Leonard Boswell. Which one of those do you get?
I don't want to make a prediction on either one of the, or any of the three, Mike, and until a candidate might emerge and we can start to handicap those races particularly. And I'm thinking more about some more vulnerable seats across the country, but I wouldn't say that none of those are vulnerable. We need to take a look at all three of those seats and make a run at them.
Congressman, given what you've just said about Republicans at the national level and the state level, what issues can Republicans win on in 2010? Is it enough to just say no and we stopped a lot of bad things from the Obama administration and the Culver administration, or do they need to have a more coherent, forward-looking message?
Well, we need a more coherent, forward-looking message, and we need a leader. This always happens when you lose your chief executive officer. The President of the United States is George Bush is retired. And so, yes, we need a strong message. I would not say that we can reconstruct a contract with America or something that looks like it with a different name necessarily, but we need to lay out an inspiration. There's a lot that's going to be gained just by taking on what I consider to be a hugely failed economic policy that's been proposed and rolled out here by President Obama. They actually won seats by just attacking Republicans without really pitching an alternative that the people, I think the voters understood. But I'd go another step forward on this and say, let's do a couple things that are transformational. Because this society, by the end of the Obama administration, will have gone down more nationalization of our private sector businesses, and we'll see more erosion of the social values in this country. We need to do things transformational. The fair tax is transformational. School choice is transformational. Those are two subjects that I've been talking about and will talk about.
Transformational change takes a transformational leader. Who's the Republican Obama?
I can't name one at this point. Or the Republican, who's the new Ronald Reagan would be a way I'd be more comfortable answering that. And I don't think that person has emerged yet. Hopefully there will be some new faces that will emerge that bring the vigor and the charisma that can match up against that of Obama.
Let's bring that back home, if I could, to build on Jim's question. You're talking about defeating a Bruce Braley, a Dave Loebsack, or a Leonard Boswell. Who do you have that can beat those people? If you're going to challenge one of those people, they're sitting members of Congress, you better have somebody out there right now putting it together.
I would give my phone number over this show just to have them call me, but I think they know how to get a hold of me, Mike. And I'm talking to a few people, and we'll be doing more of that. And when it's time to announce those candidacies, we'll do that when they're ready. But we need to do this all across the country.
And it comes back to the questions we asked you earlier about running for governor. I know where Governor Culver is in his re-election campaign. He's pretty far down the path. He's raising money. He's putting the organization together. He's doing all the field kind of things you need to do. Aren't Republicans behind times?
Republicans can always use a lot more money, and we need to raise a lot more money. We need to do that in every arena that we can for our state house, state senate races, for our statewide races that we have, as well as for the governor's race. And we're anticipating that there will be a primary in the state for governor. That drains some Republican energy away prior to the time that we can go forward in the general election. So we will be behind on the fundraising, and we'll have to work awfully hard to catch up. Significant point, I agree.
You talked about the waning days of the Iowa General Assembly. It appears in these waning days that there will be a bonding proposal, probably around $700 million for infrastructure and economic stimulus. Does that give Republicans a campaign issue?
It does for me. It animates me. I would think it would give us a campaign issue. It seems to me that was President Obama asked for $750 billion in his stimulus plan, and about the same time Governor Culver asked for $750 million in his plan. I don't think either one of them threw a dart at the dartboard, and that's how they came up with their number, but I think there's a certain amount of symmetry involved in that number. Iowa should be pay-as-you-go as a state. We are uncompetitive from a tax and a regulatory perspective. We need to become far more competitive, and I have talked before about the disadvantage we have in Iowa. Corporate income tax is higher than that of the average of our neighboring states, higher yet than the national average. That's also true of personal income tax, property tax, and sales tax. All of those things need to be more competitive. We have more regulators per thousand than the average of our neighboring states or the national average. Iowa needs to look at this comprehensively. If we're going to be an economic player, and we are a very good one with renewable energy. Today we produce enough that we could replace all that's coming from Hugo Chavez in Venezuela out of, say, ethanol, for example. But we need to have a tax and a regulatory structure that attracts businesses here and lets the entrepreneurs thrive. Right now we're starving them out. It's an anti-business climate, and that $750 million is that.
People who look at the recession and said, we want government to do something, even if it's wrong. Just do something. And Obama's responding to that.
I heard that argument. They accused me of that I'm not for something. I introduced legislation to suspend the capital gains tax for rescue capital that would come in here to pick up toxic debt. It would suspend capital gains tax on U.S. capital, the $13 trillion that's stranded overseas facing capital gains tax. Many Democrats, I will tell you, I'm convinced of this. Many Democrats drew a conclusion that they would vote for the stimulus plan because they needed to do something, and the only thing they could vote for or against was the irresponsible stimulus plan. So just because it's wrong isn't a good enough reason. We have to do the right things, or nothing is better.
Another big issue that's been fought about on the Hill is an overhaul of the state's income tax system, eliminating federal deductibility and using that money to lower rates. The studies we've seen on that said that about 75% of the taxpayers in the state would either see a tax cut or no increase. Why is that a bad deal? I'm assuming you're opposed to it.
Well, I am opposed to it. I've defended federal deductibility. The only principle that you need to argue is it a tax on a tax to deny federal deductibility to Iowans? And it is. So I oppose it on that basis alone. Next answer is, if we're interested in this seriously, we would just publish the effective tax rate rather than the chart tax rate, and that would be a more legitimate way to do this. This raises the tax on the higher income Iowans, and it may lower it on lower income tax Iowans. That sounds suspiciously like President Obama's proposal that 95% of the people get a tax cut. I talked to a lady just yesterday that said she saw her taxes go up $20 a week, even though she's not making $200,000 a year. And this math that goes on is a tax increase on balance. It grows government just like the $750 million borrowed money does, and then you end up with programs that you can't afford down the line. And they don't have a plan on how they're going to shut programs down. They have a plan on how they're going to continue to raise taxes and grow government. That starves the goose that lays the golden egg.
Congressman, speaking of some of those promises the president made, we're coming up on the 100-day mark of his administration. What sort of a grade would you give him on those 100 days and why? What's he done right? What's he done wrong?
The number one right thing President Obama did was gave the order so that those Navy SEALs could fire on the pirates off of Somalia. That's the best thing we've seen happen in America in President Obama's first 100 days. It gives us all a lift. It gives us pride in who we are again. That's the best thing.
What about releasing the papers, the memos about interrogation?
It's a disaster. It's a disaster that starts us down the path of second-guessing decisions made by the previous administration, opens up the task force that he's talked about, the Truth Task Force. It opens it up so that past administrations could end up being, and actually it could happen right away, end up being prosecuted for something that the legal analysis said was a legal act. And by the way, President Obama has redefined torture, and he's gone to the rest of the world and he's implicitly accused President Bush of approving torture, redefined it, and then said our administration does not and will not after he redefined it. And I've been engaged in this in the middle of it all along as a member of the Judiciary Committee, and I don't think they want to go down this path. Nancy Pelosi will end up being subpoenaed for what she knew and what she failed to do as well. I think they'll back off in the end, Dean.
Congressman, just last week on this program, Charles Grassley said that he thinks this is the year that national health care will happen, that they're shaping a plan in the Senate. He thinks the plan can get through the House, and he thinks the president will have one. Is this the time for national health care?
There will never be a time for national health care as an appropriate policy, in my view. Politically, this scenario is a tougher one to fight off than it was back in '93, because you have a president that has a lot of political capital, and you have majorities that have a significant inertia in the House. There's not much we can stop in the House if Nancy Pelosi decides she'll shut down the committee process, the rules process, and bring a bill through the floor with no amendments allowed and a short debate. That might happen. I hope and I expect Chuck Grassley will use all of the political capital and energy he has to fight off socialized medicine in the United States. The people spoke back in 1993 and defeated that idea. And I have sympathy for the Canadians, Mike. If we adopt a socialized medicine here in the United States, where will they go to get quality health care?
But what do you say to polls which show that health care is among the top concerns of every voter in this country? They want something done about the health care system.
Doing something because that's the thing that you have in front of you to go yes or no on doesn't make it right. Doing the wrong thing because something needs to be done doesn't make it right. Here's what I would do. I would refurbish the doctor-patient relationship. I would expand health savings accounts, allow them to increase their deductibility so they can have lower premiums. I'd let them build health savings accounts up to the point where when they reach retirement, they could buy a Medicare replacement policy with the cash and keep the change untaxed. And we can look at a lot of different ways to restructure our insurance in this country. To not be able to buy health insurance across state lines really disenfranchises a lot of people in places like New Jersey. There's much we can do. Socialized medicine is not what we should do. We have high quality health care in this country. Everyone has access to high quality health care, but we need to fix this thing prudently and hold together what we've built.
Congressman, let's talk about foreign policy. The focus of the war on terrorism seems to be shifting to Afghanistan and neighboring Pakistan, where the insurgency is rising. Is it going to be tougher to win the war there? And what do we have to do to be successful?
It is a lot tougher to win the war in Afghanistan. I have said for years that we'll be in Afghanistan a lot longer than we'll be in Iraq because they're closer to the Stone Age is the short version of that. First, I want to say we've achieved a definable victory in Iraq. By every metric that we've put out there, 17 of 18 benchmarks, 3 successful elections, a constitution, American casualties there due to accidents equal those due to the enemy. But when you go to Afghanistan and Pakistan, that is a growing mess. It's getting more and more complicated with the Taliban within 60 miles of the nerve center and with them being a nuclear-powered country. I'm hopeful that President Obama sees this thing with the totality that he spoke of and during the campaign, that it is a State Department issue, an economic issue, a geopolitical negotiating issue, and a military tactical issue, all put together in the best combination, and even then, it's very hard.
And did he make the right decision when he decided to send troops into Afghanistan? You're starting down the path into a very difficult part of the world, a very difficult part of the world. Did he make the right decision?
I supported the movement of additional troops, around 17,000 if I recall the number,
right,
going into Afghanistan. I had been there, and just last September is the most recent that I've been into Afghanistan. We had troops that were out on the end of the line that didn't have the kind of cover that they needed. So yes, we should send the troops there, but he needs to ask himself many of the questions that he asked. Is there an exit strategy? Is there a victory strategy? How do you go about doing this? And I don't want him talking to the world about that strategy. I want this chess game going on behind the scenes so that we can maintain the kind of confidentiality necessary that the enemy is surprised by the things that we do.
And there's been an uptick in violence in Iraq in recent days as America prepares to leave. As we leave, is that going to fall apart?
That depends on how they set this up. I haven't received the definitions that I've asked for on, Obama has said that he's going to pull all combat troops out of Iraq by the end of 2011.
Right.
That's our SOFA agreement that we have, actually. Well, what is a combat troop? Support troops, train troops, logistics, communications, intelligence. Are they combat troops? If they are not, then I think we can hold this together. But for every American to come out of Iraq that's there today engaged in this battle, I don't think they hold that together past 2011 without us being there to support the institutions that have been established in Iraq. They're doing a great job, and they want to do this, and I believe that we have achieved a definable victory there. It's up to President Obama to maintain that and expand on it.
I'm sorry that we're out of time. We didn't even get to Pakistan, and that's a whole discussion in itself. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Dean.
We'll be back next weekend, the usual times, 7:30 Friday night and 11:30 Sunday morning. I'm Dean Borg, and thanks for joining us today.
Archive editions of Iowa Press can be accessed on the World Wide Web. Audio and video streaming is available, as are transcripts, at www.iptv.org.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation, the Iowa Bankers Association for personal, business, and commercial needs. Iowa banks help Iowans reach their financial goals. And by the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
By Iowa's private colleges and universities, enrolling 25% of the total Iowa higher education enrollment and conferring 44% of the baccalaureate and 40% of the graduate degrees in the state. More information is available at www.thinkindependently.com.
The Iowa Hospital Association, supporting the missions and visions of Iowa's 117 community hospitals. The Iowa Hospital Association. We care about Iowa's health.